Well, we're joined now by Lieutenant General Russel L. Honoré, former U.S. First Army commander and retired three-star general. Thank you very much indeed for joining us once again. I don't know if you're following the progress of the talks in Geneva between the U.S. and Iran. Are you hearing anything that gives you any sense of optimism that there will be an agreement and that the U.S. will not go down the military road?
I think there's some optimism that the Iranians are at the table. That's a big first move. I think we have yet to clearly identify the gunboat diplomacy we're using or the pressure campaign and what's the purpose. Is it really about the Iranian aspirations to have some form of industrial nuclear capacity that they would use to have a cadre of engineers that want to pursue the use of nuclear for power and for other reasons? And there's a mistrust on the U.S. Side of the negotiation that this would eventually be used to make centrifuge to make a nuclear weapon. On the other hand, there's been talk in the U.S. administration about regime change in Iran. That comes as a big pushback to the Ayatollah and the current regime, who've been in power for decades now. And there's another conversation that emanates from the administration about protecting the protesters in Iran. So I think going to the table, hopefully they have clarified that the intent of this is to prevent Iran from being nuclear capable. But then lately the U.S. has also added some concern about the long-range ballistic missiles that Iran had for its own defense that could reach U.S. allies in the Middle East, everywhere from Saudi Arabia to Oman, where we have U.S. troops stationed, as well as in Israel. So it's a very complex negotiation. But I think if we come back to the original intent to prevent Iran from being able to produce nuclear weapon, there might be an agreement on the table. But with those gunboats setting out in one of the biggest deployments we've ever done, on the other hand, Iran holds a key card. They hold the access to the Strait of Hormuz, where over 20% of the world's oil flow. And if attacked, they could close that and have a tremendous impact on the global economy, as that oil will stop the flow out of the Strait of Hormuz. So both sides have cards in their hand.
Sure.
And the U.S. with gunboats off the coast is a sure and present danger. And the U.S. comes in with a lot of bravado based on the military success they had in Venezuela, which is not a one-for-one. That's matching apples to orange. Iran has a population of 90 million and a big country with an industrial place, with a strong Republican Guard, with some ability to defend itself and attack our allies in the region, to include U.S. troops that are stationed there. So they have a heavy card in their hand, too.
Sure. I mean, just talking about gunboat diplomacy, the USS Gerald Ford, which is, of course, the world's largest aircraft carrier, it left Greek waters today. It looks like it could be off the coast of Oman at the tip of the Arabian Peninsula by the end of next week. Does that give us, do you think, any clues as to what sort of a time frame we might be looking at this stage if the US does go down the military road?
No, pending attacks can always, as we saw in the press with the last negotiation before the 12-day war, as we call it, where the U.S. and Israel attacked the Iranian production sites, are often filled with messages and head nods and missed messages. We all pray that this does not end up in a shooting war, because people will die. And there's a threat to the fleet because Iran has some advanced missiles. And the other thing the U.S. don't have on its side this time is the European nations are not supporting this. The other people that are not supporting is our allies, include Saudi Arabia in the region, when maybe only one country in region that would assist us. And we cannot prosecute a sustained war in Iran without our European partners, because much of our aircraft sustainability and ammunition come out of England and Germany. We have to have that capacity. So to conduct a sustained campaign, as been discussed by many in the media, we need those allies to do that, as been raised by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So there are limits to U.S. power. This is not another Venezuela operation. But through that rhetoric come the real threat to the Iranian people, who will be caught in the middle of this if an attack does occur. And that is much concern to the world.
It's very rare for two enormous U.S. aircraft carriers to be in the same place at the same time. Well, by next week, they'll be in the same place roughly at the same sort of time. It would be very difficult, wouldn't it, for President Trump, with that sort of a deployment, to order those aircraft carriers to return home to the United States without having done anything. Do you see him doing that?
Well, we used to deploy these things all over the world and nobody would know about it. We've used them as a part of the pressure campaign. I mean, within hours, these things can turn around and go home or be redeployed to the Pacific, which we thought was going to be a bigger threat to U.S. security, facing the enormous combat power of the Chinese army, military. But we reassigned two of them together. That is a big show of force, but it has enormous capacity for limited strikes that could bring a lot of havoc on the Iranian infrastructure, as well as attacks on the leadership in Iran. They could do that. But as the chairman said, conducting a sustained war in Iran comes with high risk. And I'm just quoting what's been in the media from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And hopefully that's being taken into consideration in the White House, and they have some functioning and productive negotiations. I think the people of Iran, too, are somewhat tired of this current regime. They want to be able to travel around the world to advance technologies that they're creating, to be able to walk the street without intimidation of being beaten for not wearing a scarf. So there's a lot of frustration in the public in Iran. They're an educated population, and they want a better life. And you look at the infrastructure in Tehran alone, they have a big drinking water problem. And none of that's being addressed because all the sanctions against Iran. They have oil, but they have so many sanctions. The people are not living a better life as a result of the production of fossil fuel that they are feeding the world with.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time, but we thank you very much indeed. General Honoré, thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.